My fiancé rented a secret apartment. I found out and turned his life upside down. During wedding prep, I discovered rent slips for his hidden home. I acted clueless, collecting proof in silence. He never saw my final move coming, and now he's left with nothing but regret. I always believed my fiancé and I were building the perfect future, discussing marriage, saving for our dream home, and even picking out baby names. No odd clue ever rattled my trust. But one morning changed everything. He left his laptop open on our table. I assumed he'd just been careless, as he often forgot to close spreadsheets after working late. But an email subject caught my eye, referencing a second apartment. My heart pounded. Nervously, I clicked, telling myself I'd look for just a second. What I found destroyed my sense of peace. He'd been in touch with a realtor about leasing an apartment across town, an entire place I knew nothing about. They discussed deposits, monthly rent, and the importance of secrecy. He called it my personal hideaway. If we were buying a house together, why hide a separate apartment? A deep chill swept through me as I scrolled. Another email mentioned hosting private gatherings. It felt like he was living a double life. I almost woke him to confront him, but instinct told me to wait. If he could hide a secret apartment for months, he'd likely spin more lies if cornered. Quietly, I closed the laptop. He was still asleep nearby, clueless that his secret had emerged. My mind replayed subtle changes in him, new phone passwords, unexplained late-night drives, suspicious credit card charges. I'd once brushed them off, thinking he was planning a surprise. Now, I realized how blind I'd been. When he woke, he acted sweet, smiling like any normal morning. My heart thundered, yet I forced a casual demeanor, as though I hadn't discovered his elaborate scheme. After he left for work, I sank onto the couch, fighting back tears. I needed a plan, not an emotional breakdown. If he was bold enough to maintain a hidden apartment, what else was he hiding? I dug into our financial records, scanning for strange transactions. Sure enough, consistent withdrawals near the address from his realtor messages. Each new piece of evidence cut me deeply. The man I adored was living a lie. But why? A hidden mistress, something illegal? My imagination spiraled. Despite the anguish, I played my role. He believed I was clueless, so I pretended to be. Meanwhile, I quietly saved screenshots, location data, and every suspicious clue. My outward calm never wavered, yet inside, I fumed. At night, I recalled his sweet promises of our future, outraged by his gall. But I wouldn't storm into accusations without rock-solid proof. If he thought I'd never catch on, I'd prove him wrong. Once I had every shred of evidence, I'd end his fantasy on my terms. Though my heart ached, a grim resolve formed. Deception had burned me, but I refused to let him set the narrative. If he wanted me in the dark, I'd shine the light so brightly that there'd be no place for him to hide. And when the moment arrived, his double life would crumble for good. And if he believed I'd stay silent, he was wrong. My plan had begun, so had his end. I knew something was very wrong the moment I saw those messages, yet I refused to allow my emotions to push me into a rash confrontation. Instead, I found myself quietly strategizing, determined to gather enough proof so there would be no way for her to talk her way out of it. Deep down, I realized that if I revealed my suspicions too soon, she'd simply adjust her tactics, hiding the affair more effectively, deleting evidence, or even shifting blame onto me. From that day forward, I became an observer in my own life, pretending that her subtle lies and inconsistent stories didn't arouse the slightest suspicion. I kept a cool demeanor, forcing myself to nod and smile at her usual excuses about late nights at work or sudden friend get-togethers that cropped up out of nowhere. She seemed pleased that I was so understanding, occasionally even praising me for trusting her so implicitly. Little did she know, every time she turned her back, I was quietly collecting another piece of evidence. I started with the most obvious source, her phone. Late at night, when she was asleep, I would retrieve the hidden messages she thought she'd deleted. Most nights, it was a few lines here and there, coded in a way she believed would throw me off if I ever found them. But once she spot a lie, every message glows like a neon sign. She included emotional confessions, half-baked excuses, hints about secret locations, and references to future plans that had nothing to do with me. As the days passed, those deleted conversations painted a clear timeline of her betrayal. It wasn't just her phone. I checked our joint credit card statements, discovered restaurants and hotel charges matching dates she'd claimed to be overtime shifts or girls' nights. I rummaged through receipts in the car, noticing bar tabs at places she'd never once mentioned. The puzzle came together piece by piece. When you're determined enough, there's always a trail left behind. The deeper I dug, the clearer the extent of her deception became. All the while, I maintained my act, continuing our routine as though nothing had changed. We'd still cook dinner together, watch movies, even plan hypothetical weekend getaways, ones I had no intention of ever taking. Sometimes, I caught her studying me, likely trying to confirm I hadn't grown suspicious. I would offer a warm smile or a playful wink, reeling her back into the sense of security she assumed was permanent. Then came the biggest shock, an email referencing the down payment for our future. She discussed it as though my contributions were hers to claim, like I wouldn't notice. I bit my tongue until it hurt, resisting the urge to confront her. I wanted everything documented, from the credit card logs to the hidden phone calls. I needed her to tie the final rope around her plan, oblivious to the evidence piling up in my secret folder. Some nights, I lay awake replaying the moment I first discovered her betrayal. The wave of nausea, the sense that my entire relationship was a sham. It stung like a fresh wound every time I remembered her sweet voice, her smile, the plans for a shared life that now felt like an elaborate lie. Yet instead of letting my heartbreak consume me, I channeled it into a fierce, methodical resolve. She'd learn exactly how wrong she was to underestimate me. I confided only in my closest friend, who encouraged me to stay calm and think everything through. Once I had enough proof, I wouldn't just end things, I'd do so in a way that left her no wiggle room to spin a sympathetic tale. And so I gathered receipts, screenshots, location data. I documented each late-night rendezvous she thought I'd never question. Finally, I decided how it would end, publicly, or at least in a setting that mattered to her. Maybe a party with her friends, or a simple family dinner. The stage would be set for me to present every piece of evidence with unflinching clarity. And only then would I let her know the full cost of her deception. Until that day came, I'd be the partner she thought she could fool forever, biding my time and waiting for the perfect moment to strike. From the moment I decided to expose his betrayal so completely that he'd have no excuse or escape, each day felt like stepping across thin ice. Any slip on my part, any flicker of anger or offhand remark, could tip him off. Yet the deeper I dove into his lies, the more convinced I became that my caution was justified. If he ever suspected I knew about the second apartment, I feared he'd disappear in a flurry of last-minute cover-ups, or worse, drag me into some twisted version of events that made me out to be the villain. Every morning, I polished the facade of a devoted partner, from carefully brewed coffee to half-listening as he rambled about our future house. The irony stung like salt in a wound. Late at night, when the apartment was silent, I'd leaf through the newest digital breadcrumbs I'd collected that day. I felt like a private detective analyzing a suspect, not someone planning a wedding. And although heartbreak pulsed steadily beneath my resolve, my determination remained unshaken. I would not confront him until I could deliver a final blow to his web of deception. One weekend, he claimed he needed to go apartment hunting for us, ironically enough, to see if there were better deals than the house we were eyeing. My stomach lurched at his blatant duplicity. I feigned mild interest, nodded, and asked him to bring back pamphlets or pictures of prospective listings. He patted my shoulder as if I were clueless, then left wearing a self-assured smile. 10 minutes later, I was logging into our shared phone plan's location tracker, confirming he'd headed straight across town, to the address I now recognized all too well. In the midst of these daily manipulations, I discovered something that froze my blood, a hidden messaging app on his tablet. It wasn't locked behind a standard code, just tucked into a folder labeled Utilities. Inside, I found an entire conversation referencing the secret apartment in disturbingly casual detail. He discussed upgrading the kitchen, rearranging furniture, and ensuring no official mail went to our shared address. His messages were borderline giddy. Every line made me recoil at the realization of just how thoroughly he'd separated me from this other life. By the time I'd read enough to feel sick, I realized I'd only scratched the surface. But I copied every word, storing screenshots in a hidden USB drive. Occasionally, my mind floated to the possibility he might have a mistress living there, or maybe he just enjoyed double living for the thrill. Regardless of his motives, it was clear he was funneling joint resources, time, money, emotional energy, into a space I was never meant to see. Each new revelation sharpened the ache in my chest, but also fueled a cold fury that carried me through the next steps. His boldness grew. Perhaps he believed I was too trusting to connect the dots, or maybe the adrenaline of juggling two lives emboldened him. He'd praise me for being so supportive, even show me sweet texts about hanging in there together, all while I stifled the urge to laugh bitterly in his face. My smartphone's gallery grew crowded with evidence, snapshots of peculiar bank statements, photos of suspicious receipts, even short video clips from a quick drive-by of that second apartment, capturing his car outside when he'd sworn he was working overtime. I planned to assemble the footage into a neat package that told the unvarnished truth. And then came an unexpected opening: his birthday. He suggested we throw a small gathering with close friends, including a few from his workplace. My heart thumped at the idea. This could be the stage for my reveal. But I had to be certain the timing was right. If I acted too soon, I risked him twisting the story in front of our guests. If I waited too long, I might break under the strain. I spent several sleepless nights imagining how it would all unfold. He'd stand there, oblivious, while I calmly displayed every sordid detail. The satisfaction of that mental image was the only thing that soothed my exhaustion. At the same time, I noticed subtle changes in him: nervous glances, an underlying tension, like he was juggling more than even he could handle. One evening, while we were supposed to be finalizing the wedding guest list, he kept checking his phone every few seconds. When I politely asked if he was waiting for urgent news, he muttered something about a friend needing advice and promptly excused himself to the balcony. Through the glass door, I watched him speak in hushed tones, his forehead creased, occasionally shooting looks my way. Perhaps cracks were forming in his smooth facade. That night, as he drifted off to sleep, I sat in the living room with a notepad, finalizing a series of action steps for his birthday party, which was only 2 weeks away. I listed the potential guests and decided who absolutely needed to be there, like one coworker who inadvertently mentioned the fiancé's other errands months ago. I scribbled lines for how I might present the evidence, whether in digital slides or printed documents. The entire plan felt both exhilarating and terrifying. Exposing him so thoroughly meant I also had to face the truth that my life with him was an illusion. There'd be no patching things up afterward. Meanwhile, my best friend, Lucy, kept cautioning me not to let revenge overshadow self-preservation. She reminded me I might feel more heartbreak or regret once the initial satisfaction wore off. Part of me understood her warning. Pain and disappointment still lurked beneath my calm determination. Yet every time I pictured his smug face returning from errands, presumably at that secret apartment, any sympathy I had left drained away. A week before his birthday, a fresh complication arose. He asked if I'd mind him traveling for a work conference that would coincide with a weekend I'd planned for finalizing wedding details. The ease with which he suggested canceling crucial wedding prep gave me chills. He seemed almost eager to skip out, as though maintaining the charade had become burdensome. Masking my outrage, I calmly agreed, but inside, it felt like more proof that the wedding was a mere prop for him to wave at me while leading a separate existence. If anything, it reinforced my choice to make his birthday gathering the big reveal. A man who can lie so easily about something as pivotal as a wedding can't possibly talk his way out of undeniable evidence. Preparing for the party turned me into a silent conductor orchestrating a dramatic finale. I went overboard on the planning details, theme, decor, food, acting every bit the devoted partner anxious to celebrate his big day. He lapped it up, dropping more hints about how much he appreciated me always believing in him. The hypocrisy was nauseating, but I kept on smiling, nodding, letting him spin fantasies about our forever. In the back of my mind, I imagined the hush that would descend when I presented my evidence in front of our unsuspecting friends. On the final morning before the party, I gave everything one last check: screenshots, video clips, credit card logs, even glimpses of emails referencing that second apartment's monthly rent. I'd consolidated them into a neat folder on a thumb drive, labeling it "The Truth." If he tried to deny or shift blame, I'd show everyone exactly how he'd been funneling resources and time into a secret life, down to the last suspicious receipt. The emotional toll weighed on me heavily. My hands shook when I placed the drive in my desk drawer, but I managed a deep breath, reminding myself this confrontation would set me free, one way or another. And so I waited, forcing calm whenever he texted me sweet nothings, reining in my disgust when he joked about our future kids. The next day, I'd stand among family and friends, letting him lead the event, right until I seized control. The thought of pulling the rug out from under him at the height of his confidence gave me a grim sense of closure. He'd orchestrated a parallel existence with meticulous deceit, never suspecting I could do the same. But after tomorrow, his illusions would be gone. I spent that final evening alone in our living room, pretending to write party invitations. In reality, I was quietly rehearsing how I'd speak, how I'd stay composed. Once I triggered the reveal, there'd be no rewinding. Our entire relationship, years of memories, inside jokes, talk of kids, would end in that single moment of truth. My chest ached at the realization, but I refused to waver. Tomorrow was set. The stage was ready. And I was about to become the author of his downfall. Continuing from part 3, the protagonist has orchestrated the fiancé's birthday celebration as the scene for a grand revelation of his secret apartment and double life. We're building up to the big confrontation. The morning of his birthday party arrived, and I found myself strangely calm. Maybe it was the finality of it all, or maybe I'd simply run out of tears. The decorations were set up, the food was prepared, and friends would start arriving within the hour. My fiancé was in an almost childlike state of excitement, obliviously humming as he fiddled with the music playlist in our living room. I watched him from across the apartment, noticing how carefree he seemed, how he believed the day revolved around him. A cold voice inside me whispered that soon he'd understand exactly how center stage he was. Part of me felt a pang of guilt, but I shoved it away. This wasn't about punishing him for cruelty's sake. It was about setting us both free from a sham. As the first guests arrived, I slipped into my role as the supportive partner, greeting everyone warmly, making small talk about wedding plans. My fiancé beamed, recapping how hard we've worked for our future. More than once, I had to stifle a laugh or a grimace, remembering the second apartment he'd been secretly furnishing. Still, I managed to maintain an unflappable exterior. During the early part of the party, it felt like any standard birthday gathering, lots of chatter, some board games, and plenty of jokes. A few of his coworkers showed up, laughing about inside stories I only half understood. Even Lucy, my best friend and ally in this entire operation, arrived late, catching my eye with a subtle nod. She knew precisely what was about to happen. With a subtle gesture, I signaled to Lucy that it was nearly time. We relocated to the living room, everyone gathering around for an impromptu birthday toast. My fiancé looked thrilled at the attention, standing by the table with a wide grin. He launched into a short speech about how blessed he felt, how excited he was for our upcoming wedding, and how this day was just a glimpse of the happiness we'd share for years. I let him finish, even raised my glass in faux agreement. Then I cleared my throat. Actually, there's something important I'd like to share with all of you, I said, my voice steady despite my hammering pulse. He turned toward me, confusion crossing his features. The room quieted, curiosity thick in the air. From the corner of my eye, I saw Lucy slip her phone out, ready to record. Taking a deep breath, I began calmly, as many of you know, we've been planning to buy a house. But there's something my fiancé neglected to mention. I retrieved a small folder of printed screenshots, photos of receipts, bank statements, even text messages. It turns out, he already has another place. A second apartment across town. Stunned silence. I caught a flicker of pure panic on his face. He tried to speak, but no words came out. I pressed on, flipping through each page. Here's the lease agreement, where he lists himself as the sole occupant. Here's a chat log, discussing renovations he's been making. And here, I held up a final text exchange, is him talking about how he needed to keep it a secret. From me. From all of us. Murmurs spread through the crowd, a mixture of shock and disbelief. His coworkers looked at him in horror, one or two stepping back as if physically repelled. Lucy kept filming, capturing every second of his mounting dread. He stammered, "Wait, this isn't what it seems, I can explain." I set the folder down, my voice never wavering. "So explain. Help us understand why you've been funneling money and time into a hidden apartment, lying about it, for months. Why you let me believe we were building a life together, all the while investing in somewhere else you never intended me to see." Eyes darting around, he turned a desperate shade of red. "It's not about cheating," he insisted, swallowing hard. "I just needed a space to breathe, to get away from the pressure." "It's complicated." "Complicated," I repeated. "Is that why you spent thousands on furniture? Why you never bothered to mention it to your fiancé?" My tone dripped with disbelief. He glanced at his coworkers, some of them shifting uncomfortably. I planned to tell you eventually," he lied, voice cracking. "I just didn't want you to worry, or think I was hiding something big." A bitter laugh erupted from me. "But you were hiding something big. This entire time. And you had no problem using our joint savings to bankroll your escape." Someone in the back gasped, while Lucy zoomed in on his distressed expression. He opened his mouth, then closed it, like he couldn't summon words strong enough to fix this public devastation. The hush in the room grew oppressive, a silent condemnation. My fiancé, who'd always thrived on controlling the narrative, was cornered with nowhere to run. I realized I'd been holding my breath. Exhaling slowly, I addressed the group. "I apologize for pulling you all into this, but you deserve to know the truth. This man has lied to every single one of us. If he can't be honest about something as massive as a second apartment, what else has he spun stories about?" I locked eyes with him, letting the weight of his deception settle on his shoulders. You might think me cruel for confronting you like this, but I couldn't let you continue playing me for a fool. I left the party so abruptly that the drive to Lucy's place felt like a hazy dream, adrenaline pulsed through my veins, and every memory of the night blurred into one. From the gasps of friends to the devastated look on his face, everything replayed in my mind. Yet, the moment I stepped inside Lucy's doorway, it all crashed down. My body trembled, tears finally streaming after hours of forced composure. Lucy just held me, whispering that I'd done the right thing. Later that night, lying awake in her spare room, I recalled how he tried so desperately to maintain his innocence in front of everyone. It felt unreal that the same man who'd once planned our forever now stood center stage, exposed for deceiving me, and everyone else. Part of me wondered if I could have handled it differently, but each time that doubt rose, I remembered the second apartment's receipts. He'd built a life behind my back. The next day, Lucy insisted I let myself mourn. Her concern touched me. I realized I'd been so bent on exposing him that I'd barely processed the heartbreak. I read the messages he sent post-party, half apologies, half anger at my public ambush. None of it changed the betrayal he inflicted. I deleted them unanswered. Calls from mutual friends poured in. Some had heard rumors, others stood in shock, offering help if needed. A few seemed to pity him, claiming I'd gone too far. Yet no one truly grasped how methodically he'd lied, how deeply he'd woven that second apartment into our plans. I refused to let their opinions shake my conviction. He chose deceit, so I chose truth. Practical matters soon demanded attention. I cleared out my belongings from our shared apartment, piece by piece, stuffing them into boxes for storage. It felt like erasing a future I'd once excitedly anticipated: wedding decor, honeymoon brochures, silly couple photos. Each item stung, but I kept packing, reminding myself he'd left me no choice. Better to face reality than live in illusions. He continued texting, vowing we could talk this out. I remembered the smirk on his face whenever he bragged about our future while slipping away to that hidden address. Talking now would only give him space to spin more lies. I blocked his number, ignoring the guilt that briefly surfaced. That weekend, Lucy took me to see a small studio apartment for rent. She argued that I deserved a fresh start, away from the memories of our shared place. Stepping into that cozy studio, I felt an unexpected rush of relief. It was blank, untainted by betrayal. The notion of living alone scared me, but also felt strangely empowering. On Sunday afternoon, his mother called unexpectedly. Her voice trembled with sadness, apologizing on his behalf. She said he'd insisted it wasn't what it looked like, but she didn't believe him anymore. I appreciated her kindness, though it was bittersweet. Clearly, I wasn't the only one who felt betrayed. As we ended the call, I realized how far the ripples of his deception had spread, hurting not just me but those who once respected him. By Monday, rumors circulated at his workplace too. Some coworkers texted me, asking if it was true he'd been funneling time and money into a private apartment. I kept my replies short. Let him explain the unexplainable. My job was done. Through it all, Lucy reminded me to breathe, to allow moments of peace. Each night, I'd replay the confrontation in my head, how I dropped every piece of evidence like a final verdict. Sometimes sorrow mingled with pride. I'd never planned to be this person, orchestrating a public takedown, but after discovering how little he valued our commitment, I refused to slink away in silence. In quieter moments, I wondered if I'd ever trust again. But despite the heartbreak, an undercurrent of relief grew each day. I had cut ties before wedding vows or mortgage deals made the entanglement even messier. The second apartment was his downfall, and ironically, my saving grace. If he'd been less brazen, I might have been trapped for years. Life wasn't instantly perfect. I still jolted awake some mornings, expecting to see him or hear his familiar laugh. But the emptiness slowly gave way to cautious optimism. My anger dissolved into determination, to heal, to forge a future without him. After all the lies, I deserved something genuine. I left the party so abruptly that I barely remembered the drive to Lucy's place, adrenaline still thrumming in my veins. Hours later, collapsed in her living room, reality slammed into me. The fiancé I thought I knew, my supposed partner for life, had been living a double existence. Exposing him in front of everyone felt both terrifying and necessary, a forced awakening after all his deceit. That night, I barely slept. Images of the confrontation replayed like a loop, his red face, the gasps from guests, Lucy quietly filming every second. Yet a quiet relief wove through my sadness. No more secrets. No more illusions. I could finally breathe without wondering what else he was hiding. By morning, I was numb, as though my emotions had burned out. Lucy insisted I stay with her as long as needed. While I appreciated the offer, I still felt the raw sting of betrayal. Instead of crying, I spent hours scrolling through old messages, recalling moments that now felt tainted, silly late-night talks, big promises about our life together. All undone by one hidden apartment and months of quiet lies. His calls started by noon. I ignored them. Messages poured in, claims he was misunderstood, that I'd overreacted, that I'd humiliated him publicly. But humiliation was a small price compared to months of deception. I briefly considered responding, then realized nothing he said could rebuild the trust he'd demolished. I retrieved my belongings from our apartment, every box reminding me how deeply we'd intertwined our lives. Friends showed up to help, awkwardly avoiding mention of the fiasco. Some asked if I'd forgive him. I gave a brittle smile and shook my head. Forgiveness might come in time, but reconciliation was off the table. Days passed. I found a modest studio, tiny, but undeniably mine. No fiancé, no illusions. At first, the solitude felt jarring. I'd grown used to constant chatter about wedding colors, dream homes, future kids. Now, I woke to silence. Yet that silence comforted me more than any of his well-rehearsed lies. He tried texting me about returning a few items, but I told him to ship them. I refused any more face-to-face scenes. Lucy teased me about turning into a recluse, but I was simply exhausted. Building a new routine, I discovered small joys, cooking for one, finishing a book uninterrupted, drifting off to a quiet I controlled. Eventually, word reached me that he'd faced backlash from family, that his coworker circle had turned cold. A pang of sympathy flickered before I recalled his calm audacity in orchestrating his second home. If his world now felt as shaken as mine once was, so be it. That was the cost of living a lie. Some nights, I caught myself missing the good parts of us, the shared laughter, the inside jokes. But then I'd picture him handing over rent checks for a place he never told me existed. The ache would harden into certainty. Nothing worth keeping is built on secrecy. Finally, I exhaled the last of my pain, letting acceptance take its place. I'd survived the shock. I'd destroyed his narrative. And while heartbreak still lingered, I felt alive in a way I hadn't for months. I was free from his false promises, and free to create my own life, unclouded by hidden doors and unseen apartments.